Let's talk about using 3D with GDevelop. This video is being released early, so everything being talked about in this video is being worked on and will be out in the next GDevelop update. Now there are a number of community extensions, like the one Pandako made, but this video is going to be about the 3D features now built in to GDevelop. So let's have a look. I'm going to start by making a 3D box. There are also 3D models, but we're going to start with the 3D box, or 3D cube. So this object actually only has a few settings, but it has a different image for each side of the box. So let me add some of those images in, starting with the front face image, which is the top from our perspective. So if I place that into the scene now, we'll see it on top. And you can check whether or not one of the faces are actually showing. And that way you can disable it if you want to save on performance, because that side of the box is just not showing. And you can also set it to stretch or to tile on each individual image. So to act like a sprite object or act like a tiled sprite. And now we need to go to the layers. And we actually have a setting here now for 3D. So if you want to make 2D games, you just leave this alone and work like you would otherwise. But if you want to make 3D games, you need to change this setting to either display only 3D objects or display both on this layer. Obviously that's slower. So we'll start with just 3D objects. Press apply. Now if I place a couple of these in scene, there we go. You can see that they are 3D. If I give it the draggable behavior, I can drag them around. You can see this side, and over here you can see this side. Now if I give it the platform behavior and add a platformer character, we can have a 3D game going with a platformer character. We do need to change the layer settings to display both 2D and 3D objects. Now if we change the elevation, there we go. The beginnings of a 3D game. And you can actually take it one step further and go all the way with this. And create games in a 3D space with 2D characters. Okay, now let's get rid of that. Change this back to 3D only, and talk about moving the camera in a 3D plane. So I can go to the event sheet and add in a bunch of events to do this. There's a new action for camera Z position, and we'll use that to go up and down. So now if I look around, I can go along the X and Y plane, and then use this button to zoom in and zoom out in a 3D space. Simple enough. The next thing I want to do though is make it so that the camera moves and rotates and twists. So one of the actions we can use for that is to look at. And we can set the camera to look at an object. So now we're looking at the box as we rotate around it. And we can twist the plane around, and we can get real close, get below it. And because I have the bottoms of these objects checked off or unchecked, they don't show up when you look at them from this angle. Now let's create a 3D camera object. So we'll make a 3D box and just call it camera. And we don't need to give it any images. We can place it in scene. Now we can set the camera to be equal to that object's position and use these events to move that object. There isn't currently a force that you can apply in the Z direction along the Z axis, but you can still apply forces just like you would to any other object in 2D along the X and Y. And now the camera is following the camera box object instead of us just moving the camera by itself. Then the next thing to show is the pointer lock extension, which will be really useful for any of you people that want to make FPS games. What that's going to do is lock my cursor into the screen when I click into it. So now it's gone. And no matter how much I drag, it's not going to leave the screen. But what I want to do with this is use it to control the camera box object so I can look around with the mouse. And I'm not going to lie to you, I don't remember how to do it, but there will be examples released that have this functionality, so you can probably just go in and copy the camera controls to paste it into your own game. That's probably the easiest thing to do. So the camera in that game and this game are both called camera, so I don't need to change anything. But if the object I was using was called player or something else, I would need to go in and change this camera into player, as well as in here along these expressions. So what this is doing is changing the angle of the camera object by adding the mouse pointer lock's position, movement along the x-axis, divided by 20. So just how the mouse is moving divided by 20, because it moves really fast if you don't divide it by 20. And if you want to change the speed that the camera moves at or rotates at, this is the number you want to change. And then this is changing the rotation along the y-axis, clamping it, using the camera's rotation plus the mouse's movement divided by 20 again, but keeping it between -90 and +90 so you can't look all the way up and all the way down. And then these are just positioning events that make the camera look the way the object is. So I can actually get rid of these ones. There we go. Now I'm looking around with the mouse. I did need to add this one though because there's no action for Z order or Z axis in these events. There we go. Now I'm walking around like a character would. I am unfortunately not moving the way I would want to because I'm still going up and down based on those actions, but I can change that. There we go. Now when I press the W key, I'll move towards the angle the camera is facing. All right. And the rest of the first-person movement controls will be in the examples that get released. But for now, you can see pretty well how it works. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is the Billboard extension. And for now, you might need to copy this from an existing example to get it. But once you have the extension, you can create a 3D object that continuously looks at you, which is great for 2D cutout cardboard that you don't want to appear as 3D boxes, but as 2D images in a 3D plane. And so for this, I'll create a 3D box and only add an image to the back face. And I'll turn off all of the other faces. Add the behavior to the object, and then place it in scene. And now, unlike the boxes that are 3D static objects, this will always be looking at me. And you'll want to enable the transparency so that you don't have the black box around the character. Okay, so now I'm going to show a few examples of what can be done with this extension, the first of which is just a shooting example. This is a first-person perspective with the WASD movement and the mouse cursor being what aims the camera.
Arcade mode.
This is using raycasting or hit scan. Hit scan is more popular with more recent games. Then there's this Sokoban example I made where I took the Sokoban game and changed it to have a 3D perspective where you can walk around in the game itself in 3D and then change it to 2D to see where you actually are in the maze. And then this last one was made by Davey. And this is a race car example that uses a lot of different mechanics to get the game to look the way it does. Firstly, 3D models, but also using a tiled sprite for the background and billboarding for the trees, and it uses a fog effect on the layer. So if we go to the base layer, you'll see that all the other effects don't work on 3D, but fog, exponential, and linear do. You can change the color and the density, and that will affect how the game looks. Obviously, the white fog looked better in this case because the background is white or light. Okay, so talking about 3D models, let's go back to that original game. 3D models need to be in the GLB format. And to get that format for every kind of model that you need, if whatever modeling software you're using doesn't export to GLB, or whatever assets you got aren't in that format, you can take them over into Blender by importing them in with the format they're currently in, and then export them to GLB. There is no lighting in the game though, so it's a good idea to use objects that have lots of detail. Because if you put an object in that has a shape but only one color, it's not going to look like anything. And so if I add a 3D model, add in the GLB file, and then place it into the game, I should see it in game. It's a bit large, but it's there. And you can change its default orientation and affect its position and angle and so on with actions and events, just like any other kind of object. Now, on top of this being in the engine, there are a number of community members that are making 3D extensions to work with as well. I haven't tried them all personally, but there's of course Pandako's extension, and a few others that I'll link down below in the description that range in usability and complexity and do somewhat different things. And this is just the beginning of 3D with GDevelop. In the future, there's going to be more tools to work with that will allow you to make even better 3D games with GDevelop. But for now, if you want to learn about Pandako's 3D extension, check out this video.